previous to last talk. We have one more talk after this. But no worries if you missed any previous talks. All talks are recorded and will later be available to rewatch at your own time. It's 9, or for me it's 9 at least, not for everybody else in the world, but it's the hour. So, Patricia, the stage is all yours.
Oh, hi everyone. Welcome to the Intro to Environment Concept Art workshop. This is my first time presenting, so please be patient if I fumble my words. And yeah, let's get started. So, my name is Patricia. I'm currently a concept artist at Ubisoft Montreal. Before that, I did a little bit of freelancing, and I was also a 3D intern at the Canadian Space Agency, which is like a Canadian NASA. And I'm currently on the Assassin's Creed codename Hexi project. Here are some concepts I've done when I was previously on the Rainbow Six extraction team, just to give people a brief idea of what I've done. Here's some other concepts. And yeah, so for the outline of this presentation, it's gonna be a beginner friendly and explain what is concept, the design process, and a bit of how to direct your own art direction when you do your personal projects, especially for students. This is something it's really important to know. And then I'll show a personal project breakdown as an example. So I've had a lot of students who approach me to give some portfolio reviews. They're like, oh, I want to be a concept artist. But a lot of the times in their portfolio, it was mostly illustrations, fan art, and random nicks and nacks and combinations of like random stuff, props, characters, environments, where there was no clear guidance. So I just want to make this clear that concept, even though concept art and illustration, they use the same techniques of like portraying and drawing something. The intent behind the two are very different. So, illustration is, oh, you want to make some pretty images to like convey a story, emotion, or an idea. And it's really used for like marketing purposes in the game industry to like present like a high quality like final image. While concept art, it's not the case. It's really you want to design a bunch of different settings to like speed up the production, to give a visual image, or like, oh hey, how does a character look like in this X fantasy world, or like the environment. And it's really about world building, and these concepts are used to like really guide the team in the design of like the visual, like how will the game look, rather than just look pretty on like an illustration. So here are some examples I've put. I think it's really important, let's say in a student portfolio, to not only have a final, let's say, image render, it's also to show the breakdown. It's something that a lot of people miss. It's important to put like all your sketches, your process, your 3D renders. And even if the sketches are ugly, people don't care about that. The importance is really the process for a junior, and to understand how to design things rather than just make things look pretty. And if you give your concept to a 3D modeler or a lighting artist and you don't really know how to bring your concept to 3D, then yeah, that's a problem. I've put like a couple of pictures from artists that I like. Here you see a architectural breakdown of like a temple pagoda entrance, some gameplay elements, technical drawing of an airplane, and here's like an overview city for its architectural style. And then in the illustrations, for example, you see there's a vlog image. So cool, there's like a environment and there's a character, but the character is kind of like hiding the building, and it's like a weird angle where it's not really comprehensible how you want to model the cathedral in the back, which makes this more of an illustration. And then here there's a Kiki delivery service where the focus is more about the interactions. And the same thing for the Lord of the Ring picture below, where the focus is more about what's happening at the dinner table than the actual environment. So you see all the environments in the back are pretty much blurry with not much information for the 3D artist to use it. If you were to make, for example, the environment concept of the same scene, I would probably put the camera much further away to showcase the actual environment rather than the what's happening at the dinner table, and have more details and structures in the environment itself. Next. The design process. Concept art is all about researching, designing, and finding the best combinations, mix and match things together to make it look good. Then you sell it to a client, or let's say your art director, your lead. The goal of concept art is to build a product that looks good, that where the design makes sense and it's functionable. So the conception, it's really like you do a lot of research on various topics. For example, you have a medieval scene and there's a castle in there. It's important to know how does a castle look and its function, and then it being able to produce in your concepts and designs. You know, you put like a tower in the middle and then there's like houses around, then you got a fortress. It's important to at least know the function of what you're drawing, so it makes designing them more believable. And once you've like done all the research and you've chosen what type of concept you want to do, make a bunch of quick sketches, thumbnails, at least as a start, maybe 6 to 10 thumbnails, ideally. So you do like multiple quick sketches. And it could be really basic, like black and white, or just like 2 to 3 values max. And then really, it's a step that I've seen a lot of students when they presented me their profile where they kind of skipped. Or, you know, they do a bunch of thumbnails, but they all look samey, whether it's character silhouettes or environment compositions. So you want to show that you're able to compose very diverse silhouettes and shape languages, different from each other. I'll go back over this a bit later. Once you've built up your design, your research design and all, you pitch it to your art lead or your client, whoever, that the concept you have is the best to sell the scene. And yeah, lighting, tone, color in 3D, that's like when you start putting all your 3D renders and stuff. For some concepts like props, you can skip this step because props doesn't really need tones and mood. And then of course lighting is crucial in an environment to convey like a specific mood and time of day, etc. And yeah, rendering is just polishing your concept as much as possible to make it visually pleasing and inspire the production team. Now, you guys need to know this concept about the 5 W's. And people are like, what the heck is that? Well, it's very simple. It's basically who, what, where, and why. And you want to portray in your concept what is the character's background, its culture it's from, like the geographic location and the story, like what the fuck is going on in the story. Is it just like a random chick staring to the distance, emotionalist, or is it like some war in a battle against like another faction, you know, something like engaging? And then the technology wise is to indicate like the time period of your concept. Is it like medieval, where you see like bows and arrow weapons, archers, or architecturally it's like medieval town, or is it like steampunky, or like flying cars? It's really like elements to indicate what is the time era. And yeah, this is a topic that Feng Zhu, if you Google his name, Feng Zhu Cinema Design on like YouTube or FZD School, he will talk into this subject in great depth and detail, but it's basically form follows function. So when you want to do some concepts about a subject, you want to like understand what's the function of the thing. And this is important to world build your piece correctly, so it makes sense and it's believable. And understandable at first glance. Let's say, oh, I want to do a military base, but like a bit sci-fi with some aliens. It's like, cool, okay, well, let's start from reality with like a existing military base, let's say, and then you want to try building around that. Like, okay, here's like the outpost, the structure, you know, whatever. That makes sense. To have like a base in reality, like a foundation, it's kind of, let's say, oh, I want to create a character, like creature. It's like a chimera, but you need to know anatomy as a base to be able to make that. It's kind of the same thing, but environment is basically starting from reality, like the locations, what's the function of the location, the architectural style, and to make a structural base where it's like solid and believable, so it's like understandable at first glance, like oh, this is a castle. Oh, this is a watchtower. Oh, this is, something, that just makes sense. And it also shows you understanding of like the world, how it works, its cultures. It looks, you are more cultured. I suggest to watch National Geographics or like some history channels. I like to go on Kings and Generals, watch some random documentaries about like Mongol invasions or whatever, like wars and stuff. And then like once you have extra knowledge plugged into your mind, you can be like, oh, I can make a scene based on this with a mix of the other things, and you understand the subject, and then you adapt the more fantasy or whatever art style and art direction into something that makes sense and is functional. And it shows to the client, when you build your portfolio, you want to present it to like companies. It shows that, hey, you're able to take something that exists in real life and then something that doesn't, like let's say you put your own fantasy elements or you mix and match two different time periods together, for example, and then you put it together. And if you're able to make it work and that people to understand like what's like the concept supposed to be, is like, oh hey, it's like this, shows you're able to make things work and problem solve.
So yeah, this is what it means when the form or the visuals of the item follows its function. So you understand its function just by looking at it, for example, a watermill.
And I suggest people to follow this, especially for beginners. It's way easier to do something based on like reality than something that's not.
I did the same mistake when I was a student.
I'd be like, oh, I want to like make this like fantasy world and just draw whatever, but then functionally it didn't really make sense. And then I'll try to like show it to people, and then they're like, oh, it's cool, but what's really happening? It's kind of not clear what's going on.
So yeah.
In this section where I put the form over functions, it's, let's say it's really an abstract building or like it's an alien thing, and then you don't really understand what's going on at first glance. It's like a random alien tower that's like twisting around in the middle of nowhere. But as a person who looks at that, they'll be like, what the heck is this tower? Or is it like a watchtower, radio tower? Like you have no context of what it is because it just looks too alien. Sometimes it's, especially like sci-fi, it's the hardest thing to design, especially if you don't know the context of what the heck this weird thingy a bob is, or some really abstract building that doesn't indicate anything if it's like, I don't know what type of building it is. And at the same time, you have to recreate everything from scratch. So like, for example, I know some people, they're like, oh, I want to make this whole universe by myself, recreate everything. And it's like, okay, but how are you gonna make it believable? Are you gonna, it's like human history has like thousands and thousands of years of like history, culture, and language and everything. Are you gonna be able to recreate everything like from scratch to make your own fantasy world in a way that is cohesive and it makes sense? That's like way harder, right? So yeah, here's an example about the functions. I just took some random riot art from Michael Shinde and he designed some buildings in function of like the gameplay. Here's like a door. Anyways, that's another example about my point, that the form really follows the function, and function is like primordial, and it's a basis of concept. It needs to make sense. For example, in this art from Duong, you can see it's a village ruins and it's surrounded by small houses where the people live. There's like the tower here, and then they're protected by this big wall, so like to protect the village from like invaders. And further down you see there's like a port, so oh, there's people living in there, they do commerce, they do trades and stuff. Now that makes sense, right? But then you compare on the right side, it's like helicopter drop, like Feng Zhu says. It's just a tower in the middle of nowhere. You have no idea what's going on. You don't know what's a function of the tower. It's like, like design wise, that's weak. It's like, sure, we like to draw and paint like random towers in the middle of nowhere because it's relaxing and it's just like, it's chill. You don't have to think much. But if you were to present that as a junior in your portfolio, for a studio, they're like, okay, but what is going on in this piece? We don't really understand the context. So it's really from like designing from in to out. Think of like the core, what's the subject, the function, and just slowly design from outwards to make sense and to really slowly build your world to make it more cohesive and all. Next, this is my work in progress concept. It's pretty ugly, pretty unfinished.
And I'll explain the main inspirations that inspired me.
Following the 5Ws, I basically just took two eras in a different timeline and then I mashed it together to make something a bit more new. So I just took ancient Persia because like why not? And the Achaemenid, I can't pronounce, can't spell, but Empire 500 BCE, Western Asia, and then their religion is Zoroastrianism, pre-Islam. Yeah, the people got persecuted too, but yeah, anyways, rip. Then I got Myanmar. I wanted to mix a culture that was kind of relatively close together. So it's not too difficult to mix different architectural styles. If you take, let's say, one region where there's like the architecture, the culture, it's like very different from another region in the world, it might be harder. So as a start, you can take something that are similar, bash it together, and then experiment. So Myanmar, Southeast Asia, Buddhism, and architectural wise, I want to try out some pagan pagodas. For the pillars of inspiration, give yourself main images that you want to do for a concept at the first, like when you want to world build. And ideally, you do more than one image, like a series of different concepts that ties in together to build a world. Because like, in a game, you're not just gonna have one single concept for the entire game, right? You're gonna have like multiple different concepts, characters, environment, props, and a bunch of other things to tie in the entire world. So as a personal project for a student, I recommend doing that. Make your own world, bash in some random time eras or periods if you want, like technology. You can take like ancient Egypt and splash it with cyberpunk and make it work somehow. And then you make a bunch of concepts that ties in in the same world. People will like that. They say, oh, you can world build, make different concepts, and you're flexible to do more than just one thing. That's Gucci. So yeah, pillars of my project. I just wanted to do some ancient Persia. I inspired myself from Necropolis, like in Iran, this thing I can't pronounce, with some mix of like Western and Southeast Asia, like architecture, because I found that these two architecture, they're pretty similar. This building is kind of like squarish, and then in Myanmar the architecture is also kind of squarish, and at the top it's like there's like a tower, and then there's like some little spikes here. So I was like, oh, it's doable to mash them together. The base is like Zoroastrian architecture. It's pretty square, and it has like pillars, and then this thing is also square. You then just put the tower on top of the other thing, and anyways, it works. And I got the waterfall. I'm like, hey, it's a desert, but I want to make it a bit fantasy and pretty. Put just whatever, put a waterfall. You can justify its fantasy. Some white dunes, like sands, because it's pretty. And I want some Uncharted vibes because I really like exploration adventure games. So that's my vibe. If you guys want to do something else for a project, it's good to like put pillars at the very beginning just to have a clear direction and focus on what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And then eventually, a cool dude with a camel, because a horse is a bit generic. So I'm like, you're in the desert, you want a camel. It could be any type of dude, but yeah, whatever. Some inspirations from concept artists and other people that I really like is Rushan Gao. He has like amazing, phenomenal architectural skills, which I do not have. So I did a personal project based on architecture because I want to learn. Ali Esser, because it's so pretty. And Mediterranean vibes with like waterfalls, with the sunlight that's like flashy, like super strong, gives you pressure on the vacation, super nice. And then I got inspired, not gonna lie, by like Genshin Impact Summer region because I've been playing that. So I'm like, oh, I want to do something based kind of inspired. In the game, it's like this region's like a mixture of like Asia, Persia, India, um, Middle Eastern, like a bunch of regions mashed up together, and it works. So I'm like, I could like learn from that and practice, make some stuff. Research. Research, so important. Juniors, do not skip on that, please. Do not skip. It's so important as a start to build your visual library. Like I said, watch all your National Geographic, so like whatever subject you're interested in, just to understand, the functions and all. You don't need that much pictures, but I just did a couple of research, just like for each region, like the location of the necropolis, a bit of the architecture, pre-Islamic architecture, and then some other research on like the composition, another research for the Myanmar like Bagan temple pagodas and the ancient citadels. It's like research on every subject you want to implement together. And here's some nice photo packs, like pics of like the dunes, the canyon, desert thingy, whatever, and more architectural stuff you want to put in together. Make it pretty, make it nice, make it have a base that makes sense and space, foundations. Now, when you have all of that, you got your idea, you got your pillar, you got your research done, and then it's like, okay, well, it's time to do some sketches, quick sketches, make it doesn't matter if it's like super ugly to start, but you have to practice and practice to make it clear and readable, and then like you eventually get good as you practice and you have your bases and stuff. Composition, how to make it look nice. Well, there's a rule of 3. Now, the number 3 always comes back in the art world for some reason in real life, because it's a holy number. For like landscape, you got always 3 stuff: foreground, midground, background. Got the rule of thirds. All the points of interest are like in the thirds. And I could even make a rule of thirds inside of rule of thirds to make it like a secondary focal image. Anyways, and then you got size and level of detail, which is important also, like not just concept artists, but like 3D artists. Let's say in the scene, you got this big ass mountain, you got like a building in the middle, and then you got like little plants and the character at the front. You want to know how to scale these things properly and make it look nice in a composition. So we call it the big, medium, and small stuff, like elements, I mean. It's really how to compose your scene in a way that the scale is, it makes sense. Thumbnail examples. These are some quick thumbnails I've done. Not super polished, but hey, it does a job for me. This thing, it's like a mix and match of, I said, different types of architecture. I put the pics here. We got the square box here. We got the spikes and the towers. We got the dome thing for the third temples and Zoroastrian. I can't pronounce that. Anyways, you got some reliefs, the relief wall here. So I kind of mixed in all that, and then you see there's like elements of the oasis that I wanted. There's like the big rocks in the background. Uncharted vibes, like a dude. At first I drew a horse, but at the end I just changed it up because I'm like, camel would be better. So yeah, different types of like architecture that's just kind of bashed in together. So it kind of does something interesting. I ended up with like the 4th one just due to time constraint, and I didn't have much time. But yeah, lighting and tone, very important. I put this example here to compare. Once you have like your thumbnails like ready, here you want to watch out for like your values and all your tones and stuff. At first you start in black and white, so you have like all your values and it's like simple. Don't want to overcomplicate things, especially when you're still learning. The foreground's always super dark, the midground's like medium gray, and then the background is like white, so you have a clear like separation of like the 3 planes. Here are some examples of what is good and what is bad. this thing, this very shitty night street thing that it's something I did as a student, does not work as a concept because one, values, lights, and all are all over the place. You can't understand what's going on. Super noisy, unclear architecture. So you can't give that to a 3D artist, right? Because they'll be like, oh, it looks pretty, but what the heck? How am I supposed to model that thing? Well, you can't. So yeah, this is like a example of like a illustration I did before. I thought it was concept, but it turns out it was not. Mistakes were learned. Flashy colors everywhere does not help. You want to be careful with your colors. So I put like here's a on the right, it's a piece by Humaya Zhuangbu. He did like a bunch of fantastic works on like Ghost of Tsushima. At first glance, like even if you look the thing from like afar like this, you understand right away the values, the shapes, you understand the scene. Well, on the left, you understand nothing. You just see it's just like a barf of like colors. You don't understand what's going on, where the planes and stuff. It's very not clear. So like always look back from far away, put it like in black and white, and like piece. Even in black and white, you understand Homaya's like scene super well. It's like two dudes on a beach fighting. It's like it just works. Like composition wise is simple. Less is more. Great flow. This thing, nope. On the left is like a big nope. On the right is a big yep. Yes. Oops, my bad. I'll be doing a little drawings. Let's see. Does this work? Okay. Composition wise. You guys see my brush? I might have to change brush actually. I have way too many brushes, by the way, so I don't recommend that. Clean up your brushes. Settle with like a simple set where you're comfortable with. And then just don't lose yourself with like a bunch of like textures. Composition wise. Pardon if my rule of thirds lines are a bit wonky. This makes sense. Composition wise, focal point, you got the two dudes in samurais fighting. Got the thing here, it's near to point of interest. Got some dead bodies, cool, super nice. And then he attracts the attention by putting very subtle lights. It's like the only color that pops out, like in terms of colors. It still works. It's simple and it attracts attention because, in a scene you want the areas where there's like the most contrast. So here, soldiers are like in dark and they got the white fog. It's contrast attracts the attention. So in the foreground, in the back, you don't want to put too much colors or too much contrast because that's not the interest point. You want to focus, let's say, on the two soldiers fighting here, and then there's like a bunch of fires and smoke. They're like pillaging the village or whatever. Nice. And then to attract the attention, how you want to read the scene, there's like the light here, and then you have another light here, another light here. With the path here, it's like there's like a nice reading flow that goes from down to up here. So when you want to do your scene, think about that. When you compose, you just do some crappy black and white sketches. Think of how do you want to compose your scene. Oh god, please don't lag. Rendering. After you've settled all your tones, your lighting, your tones, your colors in a way that's like simple, that's readable and that makes sense. You can go and like, you can always like do a 3D block out and then you paint over. These are some of the sites that I recommend. Or like, let's say my piece, I just took some examples and like shots and pics to photobash from this photo pack on ArtStation by Yves Toro. Anyways, can't pronounce his name. This guy, there's a bunch of like other photo packs you can buy on ArtStation. There's photobash, bunch of free royalty-free images that you can take in photobash. Just a fair warning that like since it's like free and like everyone can use it, you want to make sure that when you bash your pictures to give it a little bit of rendering, you also like edit the pictures so it doesn't look all samey and doesn't look the same as like what everyone else has been doing. So what I usually do is like I work in AAA realism. If you do stylist, it doesn't concern you, but like let's say if you do AAA, I take multiple pictures of like the same subject and then I try to blend them together, erase some strokes, add some stuff so it doesn't look samey. Like it's not like this like the same image that everyone uses and it's copy pasted, just like to make some virality that make things look pretty. Kitbash 3D is you take some 3D props, kits, whatever, you buy them if you want, and if you're rich enough, slap in your scene, Blender, Unreal, whatever, compose it. There's also quick summing scan, you can like make a quick scene and then you paint over in Photoshop later. There's also texture.com. I know texture artists, they use that. It's also super useful for concept artists if you want like a specific texture of like something and then you just want to slap it on like buildings and whatever.
And
if you use something that's like
not free and illegally,
I don't suggest that. Copyrights, things like that. I don't suggest trending on that line, especially when you're a beginner, you're learning, and even as a pro, you just don't play with fire. Play safe. And yeah, is the end. Thank you for listening. I kind of speeded up through a lot of points. Feel free to ask questions, and if I can elaborate some more stuff. But yeah.
Thank you, Patricia. That was great. There are a couple of questions, so I will just read them and then you can answer them. Peter asks, how often do you brainstorm with the production 3D artists with your concepts?
So, how often do I brainstorm? I mean, honestly, I brainstorm very often, but especially again, it depends of like the companies and the size, and and with who you're with, I guess,
and the team.
But I mostly brainstorm with concept artists and the team. It's like oh hey, I mean, there's also a group chat with a bunch of other people from like narrative to like 3D. They pitch in their ideas, and it's just like a team chat, and then everyone just pitches their stuff for like stories or whatever, random videos. It's not really I mean, every week there's like a weekly meeting where you talk with the other people. You just show them your concept, your thumbnail sketches, your researches, and it's like every week at least once that I brainstorm with like my leads and stuff. And it depends on the week. It depends on the production cycle as well. Especially when it's like in beginning of pre-production. After you get, let's say, the story and the narrative from like the narrative director, it's like, oh hey, we have this story. Now you guys try to like visualize it. That's when there's like the most research and brainstorming happens. But later in production, mostly like paint overs over some stuff, 3D scenes. So there's less brainstorming at the end of the production. So I hope that kind of answers at least once. Yeah.
What would be your tips to make sci-fi look more readable? As you said, it's hard to understand to use the buildings in games like example Anno 2020-05 because they look not at all like windmills or cornfields, etc. Is there any way out of this?
A good question. I mean, sci-fi is not my expertise field, even though I've worked on these stuff. It's really it's like a thin line in sci-fi where you want to make things look still realistic enough so you understand, but if you go a step too much, too far away, it's like you don't really understand what's going on. Honestly, I mean, depends of the art direction, I guess. It's really no way out. Like sci-fi takes like the almost a double of time of production because it's so hard to make things still understandable and readable, but still make it not too normal. It's something that's like even I guess the industry struggles with to make it. Because like, if you make it too sci-fi, it's like, oh, it looks super alien-y, and then you actually just have to watch the movie or play the game to really understand the function. But if you don't, then it's kind of hard. But like, when you pitch your idea to like the art director or leads or what or client, have a supporting text to like describe your scene, I guess, and like here's the real life references, here are the inspirations, and then here's the synopsis of whatever story in your concept. I seen student portfolio, they got the concepts and the description, tiny synopsis of like the story and whatever. So yeah, it's not a clear thing how to make it readable. I mean, the more readable it is those are, I guess, more grounded to reality. But yeah.
How much do you care about directional lines in your illustrations? Like example, a branch hanging into the image pointing towards the central element.
Directional lines. I mean, I use it often, but not all the time. Wait. Let me rethink that.
Plenty of time to think about it.
Sorry about that. My brain fart. I mean, I semi care, but not too much, honestly, because that's like personal opinion. I kind of wing it. I'm just like, I just draw this. Does it look nice? Yeah, no, I just move some mountains around and things like that. But other people, like they might really care. It depends of the intent of your composition as well. Let's say it's like a mountain thing, and then there's a clear line where it's like the sunset is like flashing on the building, and then there's a huge shadow. Then yeah, if it's intentional, then yeah, it's important, and then you have like tree branches there just on the foreground. And no, it depends of like the piece I do. I still think about it, but it's not like the first thing that comes in mind. I see there's like another question. It's like, do you buy tons of art books, photo books? Are you mainly working with online images? I do both. I got a few like art books collection. And yeah, I also look a lot of pics online. It's really a mix of like what you have
and what you can find.
Often when I look at art books, it's really in terms of like composition and trying to learn from senior artists, like, oh, how did they compose their scene? How did they make it look dynamic and stuff? With online images, it depends. It's most of the time what you find are tourist shots
or HDRs.
Like on Google Image, not super polished or anything, but if it gives enough information, it works. And what's your favorite tool to gather references and notes? I use PureRef for the win. Google, the internet, our station. It depends of the subject. But yeah, I just use PureRef all the time to just do my mood boards and put every picture, all the pics I see that are cool online, and just slap it in. So I'm not sure if that was clear for the questions.
I probably hope it is. If you want, you can keep reading them.
Okay. Okay. Peter asked, how often do you scrap work at work because of different art directions? Ooh. Again, it depends on the production. Do you have let's say, for example, you have an art director or a client that is super picky about your thing and they always change their mind? Then yeah, you're probably gonna scrap it a lot because even for like themselves, they don't have a clear idea of like what they actually want. So that's when, yeah, if there's like art direction changes or whatever, yeah, you're gonna have to scrap everything. Hopefully that doesn't happen in like most of your projects, team projects, whatever. But if like you have a solid client or director or lead, whatever, who has a clear focus on what they want to do, then there's less chances of scrapping things because they have a clear focus. So it's really that. Does your client know shit or they do not know what they want? Yeah. Cairo asked, what is the relationship between art directors and concept, like saying the 80s vision is defined by your work? Do they sometimes provide a base for you to start off on? Well, in the beginning of the production, there's not much base to have. Well, you got the narrative base where it's like, oh, well, we want to make a story in this setting, in this particular region. Sure, okay, you have like, that's what you start with. You know, you do research on that section, on that region. Usually the art directors are the ones who, you know, they bring all the main references and the main inspo that they want the concept artist to follow. So it's like the art director is like, okay, well, here are the main pillars, or it could be the assistant art directors. Well, you know, here are the main pillars. Like, this is the village. We want a shot that looks kind of like this. Here are the lighting settings or the weather, whatever that the project needs, and then like you start off from that. But if you're even earlier in the production, then it's really like you and them just searching. It depends again of the project. So sometimes you have a base and sometimes you don't. Depends. Next questions. Shri, what they ask, what tips will you give someone who wants to start concept art but doesn't know a thing about drawing? Well, that's kind of hard because like drawing and art fundamentals is literally the basic requirement. Like it's the requirement to do concept art. Unfortunately, you gotta start learning how to like draw or 3D render and like do composition and stuff. It's like it's something that I've seen students, you know, they're like, oh, I want to get into concept art, but they're noob in like their art fundamentals and drawings, and then they struggle keeping up. Ideally you have to have a certain mastery and understanding of the art fundamentals before even like starting to design stuff. Let's say in character concept art, you have to know anatomy and, you know, your forms, your shapes, silhouettes, gestures before even starting to design, because these are two completely different skill sets. Like knowing to draw is one thing, and knowing to design like good designs is another whole skill steps. That's like a step above drawing. So ideally you have to like, you know, start learning, start practicing drawing ASAP, and not just drawing and practicing, but also build your visual library, which is basically like expand your knowledge, a bunch of different subjects and areas you're interested in. So you have like, you start building a visual library in your mind where you start to understand some stuff, so it's easier to draw. And you're not always like super reliant on just pictures and photographies. Like if you don't have these pictures and photographies, are you still able to like still do some designs and drawing of like specific buildings, characters, or things? So yeah, learn to draw first before concepting, ideally, because like if you do both at the same time, it's gonna be it's gonna be hellish of a nightmare. It's like trying to do calculus without knowing what's 1 + 1. Yeah, don't do it. Just learn step by step. Next question. Would you say camera artists tend to go back to concept art at such a late stage of production to study the visual language of their concept art and try to mimic it in their scenes, or is the process entirely independent? I don't really work with camera artists because I'm not a layout artist, but I can try to compare. Let's say I do like a shot for like with a marketing team, and then, you know, it depends, you know, sometimes the art director of the camera or like cinematic or marketing department, they're like, oh, you can like copy exactly like in a concept, or they're free to give in some tweaks as well to the concept. It's like, oh, we want to add more, change a bit the angle, add more lights here and there, you know. I hope that kind of answers. But yeah, I don't really work with camera artists, so I can't really give that a clear answer. Next question. Do you name all your layers? No, I don't. I am a messy person. I sometimes name them, but at first I just like layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 underscore whatever. It's just something I have to keep working on. It's more like because when I work on my own concepts, I know, I make like general folders and I name them, I color code them, so when I open them next time, I know, okay, this folder it's for trees and plants. This one is for characters. But the individual layers, like inside, like sometimes I'm lazy and renaming every single one of them. You ain't got time to waste on like naming every single layer. You just gotta draw and design quickly. So yeah, good question. Emil asks, "What brush do you use?" This is a joke question. Please don't take me. What brush do I use? Well, honestly, um, I'm not at a stage yet where I create my own custom brushes. So I mostly use like brushes that you buy online. I particularly like the kit from like Greg Rutowski or like Affleca. Or like I have some other random brush sets that that are free online. You can just find. I really like textured brushes because it saves me time instead of like rendering everything, especially when it's like AAA realistic. But yeah, organize your brushes. Don't have like 10,000 brushes where you are lost. Name them. So yeah. Blah blah blah. Ian asks, "Hi Ian. How do you deem a concept art piece finished and move on to something else? At your supervisor's discretion, personal perfectionist criteria, is there such a thing as overly rendered? In production setting, you ain't got time to be perfectionist. I mean, you can, but you don't overtime, don't crunch, whatever. Obviously, it's a bit of a half and half. I want to make it work decent enough, but I won't like over time to make it like an art piece because concepts are not supposed to be like marketing illustration level of rendering every time. So it's a bit of both. It's like when your art director approves of like the concept, it's like okay, time to move on. It's also because like I work on a timeline, on a schedule. Every week or two, just pump. There's like a huge list of tasks, so there's no time to be perfectionist about everything because it's I don't know. It depends on the production as well. It could be like if you have an art director who's like, oh, everything has to be art book worthy, and then yeah, you might have to like rework on some stuff. But usually, you're on a timeline, so yeah. Uh, yeah. Oh wait, that.
I think someone else had one last question, but they just deleted it. Um, I'm not sure if it's gonna come back in time or not.
Yeah. Well, question got deleted, so
Yes.
if there's like
In any
something else.
case, if it ever comes back, then maybe we will deliver it to you
Yeah.
in one way or another.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your informative talk. Um,
Well, thank you everyone for attending. Um, if you guys have any more questions, more related like anything, career path, portfolio, like details, feel free to just like ask me on Discord, and I'll do my best to reply all to them. But yeah, oh, I see someone typing.
well, now it's a little bit late though. Anyway, we have our next speaker already lining up to start his talk. It's the final talk of the Expo, unfortunately, but it's probably going to be a good one as well. So, Patricia, thank you again for giving your talk, and hopefully until maybe next time.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending. It was cool. All right, bye.